Welcome everyone to the Moisky News for August the 12th, 2020. Continuing on from last week's rip-roaring success that was the SNP Are Vultures, today we're going to do the SNP Are Clueless. But before that, perhaps I should address a few comments I got last week. The first being that I'm apparently an English conservative. I am not. I am English, not a conservative. Second, if by calling out the SNP for poor decisions and bad behaviour, because I'm English, it then drums up more interest for the SNP, then boy oh boy does that speak volumes for the electorate in Scotland. But I will be honest, I would very much like the SNP to stay in power, to continue to make poor decisions. And finally, if, by calling out the SNP, somebody would like to reply to me by saying, yes, but another party is doing this, you are not addressing the fact that a party is doing something wrong where they are, you are deflecting onto something else. I will get to them eventually. For now, I'm going to focus on the SNP. Why? Because they get the views! Selfish, I know. So to start, because of the lockdown, there are a number of issues with NHS Scotland. One of the more concerning aspects of the lockdown in Scotland was that many patients suffering from chronic pain conditions had to travel for private treatment to England. Now yes, there might be an issue there with people breaching lockdown even under medical circumstances, but NHS Scotland was not granted the funds needed. There were, of course, accusations levied at the United Kingdom government for not releasing additional funds to the Scottish Parliament, to then give that to NHS Scotland. However, since we all know now how badly it was handled across the board, it was unlikely they'd be able to do that. It's just the damning statement that it was so strict in Scotland, they had to travel elsewhere and pay themselves to receive the treatment they needed. This, by the way, all came courtesy of a BBC investigation that found many patients had turned to private treatment. This affected up to 60,000 people who would typically use the NHS Scottish pain clinics. Typical cures such as lidocaine pain infusions or specialist injections were made unavailable as a result of the lockdown, with a number of MSP politicians indicating this was unfair and that the Scottish Government had to cover the cost of treatment and travel for patients who had to make a very painful and difficult journey. It's interesting that people have had to turn to England when they hate it so much. Fascinating. Next, the SNP government has refused to hand over information to Holyrood's committee on the Alex Salmond probe. For many that don't know, Alex Salmond was found not guilty of many of the charges laid at his feet. I think one was not proven, the rest were innocent, or not guilty. There were a number of meetings, though, that took place between Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond. The inquiry is requesting the information from that, but the SNP are using a parliamentary legal privilege to block it. The inquiry also will centre around the fact the investigation was botched, and that much of parliamentary procedure was not followed when conducting the investigation. This is all quite interesting because the Scottish Government by and large had promised to be open and transparent, which comes across as a bit of a stumble really, doesn't it? When the first thing you're trying to do is hide some of the information they are not releasing. Robin McAlpine, a prominent Scottish independence campaigner, indie ref for those who don't know, who is a director of the Commonweal think tank, has launched a bit of an attack on Nicola Sturgeon, accusing her of blurting out utterly ridiculous bursts of unsupportable braggadocio. In his blog he wrote, "It is, I think, finally possible to write in public what everyone has been saying in private. SNP headquarters is utterly corrupt and has been for years. Everyone in my experience has been saying that SNP HQ is an utter disgrace for 5 years. HQ routinely, and remarkably openly, smear internal critics. It rigs things to favour preferred candidates. It simply ignores serious complaints if they're about the wrong person. It is toxic and nasty, but people have believed they have no option but to stomach it. The real truth is, that it doesn't pretend to act for the party as a whole, but only for the leader and a small clique organised around her. It is a stain on Scottish democracy. I'm sure someone's going to character assassinate Robin McAlpine regardless, but this is quite the accusation to levy at the SNP. I keenly await them not responding in favour of just fobbing it off, like any good politician does. The final thing, and I guess the main event of all of this. Oh boy, the SNP implemented a little grading system for schools with the help of the Scottish Qualifications Authority, SQA. They assigned grades roughly depending on certain criteria in regions of Scotland. That's an oversimplification, I know, and someone's probably going to write an essay underneath explaining the vast intricacies. I don't have time to go through it in this video. Thank you for your comment. A number of students who were considered straight A students, though, have ended up walking away with 2 A's and 3 B's, which in turn could have potentially destroyed their chances, for example in the case of Olivia Bigot, of becoming a medical school student. You'd need slightly better grades for that. And this means assessing based on everyone else around you and location is a rather bad tactic. Granted, she's not the only person affected by it. There are many in the United Kingdom as a whole affected by it. Yes, in there before someone comments that. And it is a system that should be instantly abolished. It should be predicted based on how well you have done up to the moment you were unable to sit the exam. This being quite the mess that it is has led the SNP to have to U-turn on this because teachers had in fact recommended they do it means assessed based on the student and not the region as a whole. They U-turned and have apologised, been forced to, I'll be honest, to all the students they have betrayed with these absolutely disgusting grades. One person should not be punished because everyone else is inferior, or because their region is poorer, so grades are normally a little lower. Bit disgusting, don't you think, Nicola? The SNP are clueless. At some point I will do how the Conservatives are snecks, how Labour are feckless, but for now we'll stick with this one. We'll see how this does. With what I've discussed today, I'd love to know what you think. Please do let me know in the comments down below.